Hi, my name is Brian Martin. This is my political analysis assignment for Dr. Cross's Introduction to Philosophy class. There are 5 things that the Athenian court or the mob had accused of Socrates. With the bitter events of the Peloponnesian Wars, Alcibiades had been advising Sparta for the war, and because he was Socrates' student, the Athenians found Socrates responsible for the student's act of betrayal. Another charge was refusing to judge 8 Athenian generals on board with the committee of the Synod of 500. As well as being close friends with Critias and Charmides, who were in the corrupt dictatorship Commission of 30. However, that being said, the main 2 charges made against him were misleading the youth and not worshipping the gods of the state. In the case of Socrates, when you question the majority or the prevailing power structures, we'll attempt to silence you. The first example I can draw to this is the March for Science for Climate Change and Public Health organized by Caroline Weinberg. A second example was when more than 200,000 people peacefully gathered for Martin Luther King's delivery of his I Have a Dream speech in 1963 to promote racial equality in the United States. A third example is the Tiananmen Square after Hu Yaobang's death, where thousands of students marched to protest the oppressive communist government in 1989. A fourth example is Gandhi's Salt March, where Mahatma Gandhi journeyed 23 days in protest against British taxation. And more than 60,000 people were incarcerated for participating because collecting salt was illegal under Crown laws. Lastly, the Boston Tea Party of 1773 was organized by John Hancock and led by Samuel Adams, in which Bostonians destroyed private property and cut open crates of tea to dump the contents overboard. Now, a similar tragic crime of injustice was the assassination of Gandhi. Gandhi was a spiritual political figure who fought for nonviolent resolution and equality for all people. Unfortunately, he was murdered by Nathuram Vinayak Godse, a Hindu nationalist who disagreed with Gandhi. Gandhi's passing, similar to Socrates, impacted the world and their nation's history. America has become possibly one of the most politically divided and dysfunctional democracies for the world. Some cases for this have been Christian nationalism, in which a political ideology is a political ideology of the United States identity. Now, despite being called a melting pot for people of all cultures, religions, and motherlands, schools used to have prayer after the Pledge of Allegiance, which has since then become a moment of silence, and we see "In God We Trust" on our federal notes. To add to this, there is often prayer before sports games, and this all combined disrespects other people of other religions who have been forced to partake in these things. A second cause for the division of America is the media. Now, living in the new age, we have knowledge at the tip of our fingers all the time. Our constant media consumption and the speed of technology lead to a lot of misinformation, which divides people not only for existing opinions, but uneducated ones as well. Now, it is likely that bad feelings of a deeper, more primitive nature were important factors in Socrates' execution. The examples I'm providing concern the degradation or the demonization of political opponents are likely what Socrates was faced with. That being said, the first example, or the inappropriate way that this occurs, is smear campaigns. Smear campaigns are typically spreading false information about someone to damage their reputation or credibility with the intention to destroy their image. A second example is personal insults, in which an opponent will speak disrespectfully towards them or mock their characteristics or background. Lastly, a third example of this is threats of violence. This could be using physical force or abusive speech to intimidate them. For example, just weeks before the 1994 Winter Olympics, figure skater Tanya Harding was implicated in the attack on Nancy Kerrigan. Voting is a complex, multifaceted topic with interfering opinions. There should be a minimal standard of preparedness and awareness in case some people are only voting because they were not prepared and someone else just told them who to vote for. For an ignorant voter to choose correctly, they can do their own research and read about the candidates and issues on the ballot, as well as fact-checking information. If I had to personally set standards for better voting, the first I would look into is verifiable voting systems in order to have transparent voting systems that could produce verifiable paper trails and are auditable to avoid electoral fraud. A second voting standard I would propose is voter education, in which the government would provide political education to the public to increase the public's understanding of voting and civic responsibilities. A third would be reducing the influence of money in politics to ensure an even chance for all contestants. And fourth would be make polling venues easily accessible to all eligible voters, especially disabled. And fifth would be to simplify ballots so voting is straightforward and it reduces confusion among voters. The mob was irrational and dangerous, swayed by sophistic appeals to emotion rather than reason. The elite represented by the behavior of the 30 was cruel, self-centered, and greedy. An example of the mob is the Capitol Hill riot on January 6, 2021, in which Trump supporters stormed the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., in an attempt to disrupt the presidential election results of 2020. On the other hand, an elitist could be shown by licensed doctors undermining women's health and pain, because pain is generalized for women. Many women have gone to doctors in hopes of pain relief, when the doctor dismisses them as dramatic and prescribes something, until eventually the client will go through however many doctors it takes for one to bother and find out her pain is actually a medical condition and needing immediate and proper care. Some people are unwilling to reason intelligently or utilize unbiased facts, data, and evidence when discussing controversial issues. One reason for this is emotional investment. Some may have a strong emotional tie to their opinion, and which makes it difficult for them to take other perspectives or evidence into consideration, especially if it contradicts their own beliefs. A second cause is confirmation bias. People tend to seek information that supports their beliefs and dismiss information that would contradict it. Lastly, a reason for this is lack of individual thinking. To evaluate evidence, consider alternative perspectives, and identify biases properly, one needs to be able to do this without telling them what they need to hear. They should learn themselves. However, in our digital world, we rely heavily on social media, which is where many people get news now. According to Plato, a state is just when it functions fully. An unjust state is dysfunctional and fails to meet some essential need. In the United States, there are many things that prevent us from being a just state. A specific problem that is neglected is income equality. America is one of the wealthiest nations in the world, but has a high level of income inequality, with a large portion of wealth concentrated in the hands of very few people. The Me Too movement brought major attention to this. A second problem in the United States we need to address is healthcare. Access to affordable and good healthcare is a struggle for many U.S. citizens, especially for uninsured or underinsured. Thirdly, the U.S. has had a long history of racism and discrimination, which continues to impact communities of all minorities. A fourth problem to combat is the political polarization, with people on both sides becoming increasingly entrenched in their views and unwilling to meet in the middle. The last problem I bring up, as well, it applies for not just America, but as well as for the rest of the world, is climate change. Climate change is a growing crisis, and the U.S. has been arraigned for its lack of action. Now, some benefits. Plato says that a democratic state will contain every type of human temperament and is always in a constant flux, hostile to the possibility of a fixed hierarchy of being. One benefit to democracy is political equality, as democracy provides for political equality where every citizen has an equal say in the decision-making process through the right to vote and participate in the political process. Second, democracy is based on the principles of individual liberty and freedom and protects the rights of individuals, ensuring they will not be oppressed by the government. This includes the right of freedom of speech, religion, and expression. And the last benefit to list is the required accountability and transparency of elected officials' decision-making process. This ensures that the government is held accountable for its actions and its responsiveness to citizens' needs or concerns. While there are good things about democracy, there are problems that come with it as well. One notable issue is the lack of representation. Not all citizens feel that their needs and opinions are properly represented. For example, minority groups may not have enough political power to voice their opinions. A second issue is the significant role of money in democratic elections. Candidates need funding to run campaigns, which can lead to situations where those with financial resources have a greater influence over the political process. And lastly, democracy operates on the principle of majority rule, where the party with the most votes wins. The problem here is that it can lead to situations where the majority imposes its will on the minority, potentially violating their rights under those separate values. The minority may not always make the majority may not always make the best decisions for the collective good of the country. One of the more prophetic passages in Plato's Republic describes the effects of too much liberty will produce. One of the effects of too much liberty can be seen in the widening income gap between the higher and the low classes. In a system where individual freedom is a priority, wealthier individuals and corporations are often able to attain more resources and power leading to an unequal distribution of wealth and opportunities. Second, negative consequences can ensue with a lack of regulation in certain industries, such as environmental degradation, exploiting workers, and public health crises. Third, too much liberty can lead to the spread of misinformation, particularly over social media. False or misleading information can spread quickly, undermining public trust, which has serious consequences for democracy and public welfare. Now, according to Plato, the built-in excesses of democracy already contain the seeds of tyranny. What looks like freedom can be a lack of control, and what looks like a lack of control, and what looks like power can be a form of enslavement. The first democratic type of tyrant that comes to mind is Adolf Hitler. Now, Germany became a republican democracy in 1919, shortly after World War I. Hitler had risen to power through this democracy, and he established a dictatorship and committed absolute atrocities against minorities, most notably Jewish communities. A second example of this is Joseph Stalin. Russia's form of government is technically a semi-presidential republic, but noted as a democracy resembling communism. Stalin rose to power through the Communist Party, but ruled as an authoritarian dictator. A third example is Saddam Hussein, who ruled as a dictator, suppressing opposition and committing human rights abuses after working through the Ba'ath Party. Finally, Slobodan Milosevic, a Serbian nationalist politician, became the president over Serbia and eventually Yugoslavia as an authoritarian who held absolute power. And that is my presentation. Thank you.